Hi everyone and welcome to This Is Why We Fight. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jordan.
Hello, good evening. What are we talking about this evening, Jordan?
Well, we have something slightly unusual for us, and we are going to talk about the way that people talk to government. The thing that brought this about is, today I suppose, Joe and I were mooching through some stuff and we came across a petition. I think Andrew posted this on Discord, actually.
He did.
Didn't he? Yeah. The petition itself is something that any sane individual would agree with. I'll read it out just quickly. The petition title is, "Do not restrict our right to peaceful protest. The right to peacefully assemble and protest fundamental principles of any democracy, rather. I am able to read occasionally. And the proposed part of this bill, I've forgotten the name of the bill, they also haven't listed it. The proposed part of this bill gives the police powers to tackle disruptive peaceful protests. And they want it removed from the Policing, Crime, Sentencing and Court Bill."
I'm guessing that's different to largely peaceful protest then, or mostly peaceful protests.
Mostly peaceful, obviously. Disruptive peaceful protests, bad. Largely peaceful protests, good. Or as we saw in America, slightly fiery protests.
And as you say, the petition itself, the idea behind the petition is perfectly valid and we agree with it. It's just the wording. It's, please government, do something nice, rather than telling them that we know they're breaking the rules, breaking the law, and we're just not having it anymore, right?
It's very subservient. It's very much like the entire COVID narrative. If we just behave enough, the government will stop abusing us.
Exactly.
Even this here, this petition acknowledges that what the government is doing is wrong, but the tone of it is very much, please don't do this, as opposed to, you will not do this.
Yeah, like you have the power to do this, but please don't. Well, they don't have the power to do this. Or rather they do, but only because people are allowing them to.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't have the legal right to do it. They don't have the authority to do it.
A part of this I would put down to how the petitions.org site works, or petition.parliament.co.uk rather. Because at the bottom of each petition, for those who haven't seen it, they say the first option is government will respond. Government will respond to all petitions that get more than 10,000 signatures. This has gone far, far, far beyond that. So there's going to be some sort of reply. The second bit, though, Parliament will consider this for a debate. The fact that you have to ask Parliament to consider it for a debate is ridiculous. The people who have sent this in, it isn't up to them to consider whether they want to debate it or not.
Hold on a moment. Parliament will consider this for a debate. The rule used to be, if it reached 100,000 signatures, it would be debated in Parliament.
I thought that was the law as well, I'll be honest.
It was,
I'm not sure
until
when
recently.
It's changed.
Probably since the lockdowns began.
No, I would have a feeling it changed a while ago. I don't know when it would have changed, though. But it's just their general sort of attitude that Parliament have. There is another petition that we came across. I'll read the title of this one out as well. "We need an option for a potentially corrupt PM and cabinet to be impeached." Now, why exactly you stop just at the cabinet, I have no idea. But this person seemed to do that. The response from the government, though, is pretty much what it is on most of these petitions. Why was this petition rejected? It's not clear what the petition is asking the UK government or Parliament to do. I would think the title was pretty damn clear. Wouldn't you, Joe?
Well, that seems to be their stock answer, even when they are explicitly told to do something,
Yeah, there's
like
some.
control the borders or stop lying to the public. You get the same stock excuse. We don't really understand what you're asking, don't you?
The scrap the home testing thing, the £200 home COVID test nonsense for once you've come back from holiday. That was rejected, or at least one of those positions of that ilk was rejected, and the reason was because it wasn't clear what they were being asked. The title was as clear as day. You could have sat a 5-year-old down, asked them to read it, and they would have been able to tell you what it was. The government's reading comprehension must be that of a 3-year-old. It's embarrassing.
Well, they're obviously using that as their stock excuse not to take anything further. We don't understand what you're asking of us. We're asking you to scrap something. How difficult is that to understand?
Exactly. The reason I brought this second one up, though, is because of the incredibly condescending answer that it then gave, because it fleshed out a little bit more. Impeachment still technically exists as a parliamentary privilege. However, it is now considered obsolete in light of constitutional changes and developments in how Parliament scrutinises ministers.
Does Parliament scrutinise ministers at all?
Well, I suppose after the expenses scandal, they go through the books every couple of years. It then goes on. In any case, impeachment of a minister or prime minister would be a matter for Parliament and not an action that could be started by public petition. Why isn't it?
So you're asking the group that are corrupt to investigate themselves, and they're basically saying this will only happen if we deem it necessary and members of the public cannot do so.
Exactly.
The people who pay their wages do not have the right to hold them to account.
We're just plebs. We don't understand.
Is that exactly the reason why we wanted to leave the European Union?
Pretty much.
Because ministers weren't elected by the public. They were chosen within their own ranks, and that they couldn't be held accountable. They couldn't be fired for any wrongdoing. They could only step down if the rest of their council decided that they should. So if the government is actually unaccountable to us in the same way that the EU is, then the next petition should surely be for the people to leave the UK government.
Mm-hmm. Just the phrasing of their answer. In any case, impeachment is not an action that can be started by the public. Considering we put them there, and they love to remind us that the police by consent. Do these people not govern by consent?
As they say they do all the time.
They seem to believe they have some sort of
God-given
inalienable... Right. Yeah, exactly. Some sort of inalienable right to govern over us.
Well, I guess elections are worthless then, aren't they? If the people can't remove them, then surely the people don't have the power to put them there. It's almost like when you vote, the winner's already been decided. That must be the case, right?
Yeah, otherwise you'd be able to remove them.
But again, the subservient language that you've mentioned is rather disheartening. We need to remind ourselves constantly that these people serve us. They are our elected representatives. And can anyone honestly say at this point that anyone in Parliament represents them? Or the things that they care about? Or their concerns? I can't think of a single member of Parliament. There might be one or two that hit upon one or two things that I might agree with, but overall, no, not a single one.
Well, every now and then one of them hits upon something. Jacob Rees-Mogg is the most obvious example of this recently. He hit upon something and he kind of rode that wave for 2, maybe 3 months. Then it all came crashing down because the rest of his personality came through. That's pretty much the best we have with these people.
It's like there's a really clear distinction here between the people who go extreme crazy in people who start to move towards patriotism. Jacob,
What do you mean by extreme crazy?
or the left, any abnormal stuff, essentially, is what I mean by that. Jacob Rees-Mogg rode a wave of semi-patriotism for a brief period during the whole Brexit debacle. And so he'd nailed down one or two issues that people agreed with. And this Mogmentum thing started. Do you remember that?
Oh, I haven't heard that word in years.
Well, yeah. Let's take a trip down memory lane back to 2016. But yeah, I remember Mogmentum, and I remember having lots and lots of arguments on social media with people saying that Rees-Mogg was. People just saying like, oh, he has a nanny and this, that, and the other. And I was like, yes, but who cares? What he's fighting for should be important. If he's fighting for something now that's right, it doesn't make everything else he did right. And if he fights for something that's wrong, it doesn't make this wrong.
Mm-hmm.
People are so caught up on the messenger rather than the message. It seems to be always the way. If a message is good, it will stand on its own merit. And if a message is bad, it will do the same. You should judge the message, surely. Because the message is the idea, is the thought, it's the opinion, it's the process. The messenger is just the loudspeaker for it. But I didn't agree with Mogmentum, even though I quite liked what he had to say on that one issue. I didn't agree with it because it became a bit cult-like. I don't like this idea that you put a single person above everyone else in that respect when you're talking about sort of an online thing. Mm-hmm. But I do remember it was patriotism. He struck a nerve with people who cared about the country.
I think it's because he came over as being very, very, very English.
Well, there's that. For starters, that's a rare sight to see, especially with those politicians who will engage with the media. Most of those politicians, the few that I've heard, so few in fact I can't even think of a single name. You may hear them at PMQs or something, or someone may have clipped a section from the House of Commons. But they won't go on things like LBC and various other radio shows and actually talk to the public direct. So I think that's another reason why this Mogmentum thing occurred. But he kind of spoke... You're right, I think he kind of spoke for the English in a way that no one else ever has. Mm-hmm. Look at Boris. All Boris ever talks about is GB, Team GB. He never really speaks about England. In fact, I can't think of a politician who does.
I'm not sure Boris has ever spoken about England, to be honest.
Or England and Wales. Just unless they're talking about legislation and it happens to be in the title. In fairness, I've never heard them speak about England in a derogatory manner either. I just never at all. But it still goes back to this idea that we're being taxed and forced to pay for things like the NHS and various other things. But where's the representation? And then you've got people writing these petitions and, power to them. I think it's a fabulous idea because somebody in the civil service has to read all of them. And boy, some of them were funny. But we've got to stop asking them to do things and start telling them, we know what you're doing and it has to stop. We're not having this.
I think the real power of these petitions is not getting the government to reply to them. Getting the government to reply is completely and utterly irrelevant because you know what their reply is going to be and you know the fact that they now consider it for a debate rather than have to debate it basically means anything that's a little bit uncomfortable can get swept under the rug. No worries at all.
Yeah, they'll just reject it by saying there's another petition, so they won't have multiple ones on the same subject. Or they will give that rubbish excuse that they give where you haven't made it clear what they should do. I'm waiting for the petition that says the person reading this should resign. And they'll come back with, but you haven't been quite clear enough about what you'd like us to do.
No. What they would say in that case would be, we can't accept petitions about honours or appointments, which include calling for ministers or MPs to be sacked, resigned, or subject to a recall vote or vote of no confidence. This also applies to our backroom staff. That would be the reply for that one.
And our cleaners and tea ladies and whatever, valets and chauffeurs. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, when you think about it, really, they have three rights of rejection here. They have the initial rejection. We don't want to talk about this because it doesn't meet our standards. Basically, it's not clear enough, whatever that means. They then have the second rejection, which is not really a rejection, but it kind of is. It's simply people being unable to get enough votes or enough signatures to get it spoken about in the first place, to meet the second threshold, which is 100,000 votes, by the way. And then they have the third right of refusal, which I think is the most important one of all. The fact that they will consider having this for a debate. Something like this here, do not restrict our rights to protest. It's well cleared the 100,000 threshold. It should be seen in the Commons, probably will not be. And the reason it won't be is because they will be able to turn around and say, Parliament has literally just debated this. We have nothing more to add. Because they have just debated this in reality. They were speaking about this last week. There's nothing new that they can say now that they couldn't have said then. So they have no reason to talk about this. And that will be why they reject it in the end.
Well, that's on paper, of course, but the reality is they don't want people thinking that it's even possible to have control over your government or to have influence over your government, because that's a road they do not want to go down. They do what they want and they make our laws, and we have the choice to follow those laws or be penalised. And that's how they like it. And they don't want the little people like us getting too big for our boots and thinking that we can somehow influence them, even though, of course, they do that to us all the time. These public servants are not doing a very good job of serving the public, are they?
They're entirely correct in that we are unable to influence them. They're bought and paid for. We have no ability to control what they do. We can't even get them to discuss things that we want them to talk about. They've changed the law so they don't have to do that either. They can now consider these things as opposed to have to see them.
That's definitely a change. I'm absolutely calling that.
That is a change. I don't know when they changed that, but I do agree with you. I remember seeing that.
I used to be on one of those petitions.
They have to do it.
Yeah, I used to be on one of those petitions notification service things.
Was it change.org?
Yes. And I've read loads and loads of petitions, most not even worthy of a mention. But I've read that 100,000 signatures to have this read out or debated in Parliament so many times. I know that was true.
Yeah, same here. I know it was. I'm not sure when they changed it, because you are right. They've definitely changed that.
I suppose the government are on damage control at the moment, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they must... I don't know. They'd have to be living under a rock not to understand that people are fuming with the... not just how they've handled things, but their own attitude towards it. The fact that they can still give these daily platitudes and not hang their heads in shame for all the death and misery they've caused. I don't know. I genuinely don't know what kind of person you need to be a politician with the current system. It's like there's something missing. When everyone was queuing up for their dose of humanity, I think the politicians were in a different queue. And maybe
they were in the greed bucket.
Or they were getting acting lessons. Except Matt Hancock, of course, who couldn't even do it.
I will defend Matt Hancock. What is the man meant to do? He was faced by William Shakespeare, for goodness sake.
That was ridiculous. All the stuff they force us to swallow, they're literally laughing in our faces every day. And people still stick up for them. Call them incompetent. They're not incompetent. They know exactly what they're doing.
The incompetent thing is what gets me the most. How many times does somebody have to be incompetent before you say, you know what, I'm not sure this is working? Maybe we should possibly have a change.
Oh, this person's a menace to the public. This is way past incompetence.
Exactly. These people, everything wrong that they do is just brushed aside as incompetence.
Well,
there comes a point it's not incompetence.
Let's bring up an example of their consistent incompetence, shall we? The borders to the UK. They didn't lock them. They didn't lock them down. They locked people in their homes essentially, but they didn't lock down the borders. Dinghy people are arriving daily. People are coming and going through official channels, like ports and airports. Is that incompetence? Surely international law says in the event of a worldwide pandemic, quarantine protocols should be given a free pass. No?
You would imagine so.
Like locking down your country to prevent the spread of a fatal disease. And yet nothing. Some countries locked down and other countries didn't. Well, some countries locked down their citizens, other countries locked down their borders. The countries who locked down their borders seem to have recovered very quickly. So,
okay, let's talk about this myth that they're incompetent. Where do you think that came from? Do you think that came from a well-sculpted image from politicians over the decades? Or do you think it came from maybe not a directive, but I'm going to call it a directive, but I don't mean it as forcefully as that. Like a directive towards the media, or to the media rather, that they should be framed in such a way? Or do you think it's just our nature? Do you think people are actually much more forgiving than we realise, and we are happy just to put things down as incompetence and move on?
No.
Or do you think it's a combination of all three?
I think it's a cleverly crafted persona. Look at the buffoon that is Boris.
Yeah.
Before he became PM, he was this nutty uncle, professor type, wasn't he? His hair was always all over the place.
But he was a man who was getting stuck up a zip line with
exactly.
Union Jack flags, for goodness sake.
He used to do crazy, benign things, and everyone would be like, "Oh, he's such a jovial fellow," and you know, bit of an idiot, a bit of a twink. I think it's a carefully crafted performance. Not one that they all engage with. I'll agree with that. A directive to the media, potentially. I mean, if anyone wants to pretend at this point that the media is not working for the state, then go and get your head read. Because the media are very carefully deciding which statistics they print or discuss, which photographs they share, which stories they promote. The media used to have investigative journalism, if anyone can remember what that means. In particular, there was one newspaper called the News of the World. I can't remember why it got shut down, but they used to have regular exposés
I think it just ran out of money,
on
didn't it?
paedophiles. Well, surely all the others have run out of money. The News of the World was an amazing newspaper. If only for that one thing it did. Wasn't it owned by the Sun Group or the Mirror Group or something?
I think it was owned by the Mirror.
Well, the Mirror's still going. Even so, even though the newspaper shut down, they could have still taken the good things. Maybe the Mirror's gone so left-wing now, exposing paedophiles is a bit close to home. Who knows? But they used to do an amazing job with that.
In 2011. I didn't know that.
Oh, come on, newspapers don't... The media doesn't go bust.
Well, you know what I
They
mean.
care more about their agenda than
ended.
money anyway.
It died.
It was killed off, more like. But it actually served a purpose. It actually investigated things. It actually exposed bad deeds. And it actually delivered news. And all you're getting now from your newspapers or your media generally is propaganda, stories.
I just remembered what shut it down. They didn't go bankrupt. It was Piers Morgan.
Oh,
It was the phone hacking. He was at that paper. I thought he was at one of the others.
that's a bit lowbrow for Piers Morgan, isn't it?
You know, if you look at Twitter, whenever he does something even remotely right wing, butter wouldn't melt in his mouth.
True. Well, anyway, so yeah. So the point is that, newspapers used to hold the government to account, much like the shadow cabinet used to. I think I've seen Keir Starmer trotted out about 5 times.
You've seen him that many times?
Since he became Labour leader. One was to tell the
modesty.
government off because the nurses didn't get the pay rise that they were trying to coerce the government into giving them by threatening to protest. Another one was, of course, he spoke out about that curfew thingy, and he spoke out about lockdowns and vaccines and various things. He's even more of a puppet than Jeremy Corbyn, and that's saying something. Of course, if anyone is unfamiliar with Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, he was in charge of the CPS when they decided not to prosecute certain rape gang crimes. Not a very nice person. Certainly doesn't believe in right and wrong. But yeah, it's just, who is holding the government to account right now? Is it the people with their petitions? Yeah. Is that it? Is it us sending in petitions that they may choose to read or not? Have us jump through hoops to reach this criteria, and then they get to decide if they're going to read it out or not, or discuss it or not?
And the problem with the debate as well is they can just basically fluff it, and then that counts as your debate.
Well, they can say, Joe Bloggs has asked that all MPs stop lying to the public. Does everyone agree with this? No, right, I count 300 no's. That's the debate over. Moving on, next. It's
that
not
was
a debate.
One of the things that was rejected.
It was rejected. Do you remember why?
It was rejected because it wasn't clear. I don't know how much clearer you could get. Make it illegal for MPs to stop lying to the public. Okay, is this something anyone disagrees with? Goodness sake, you can go into the Commons, you could ask anyone on the opposition benches if they agree with that, and they'd say yes. The only people who would ever disagree with that are in the government. That's it.
Do you know what I'd like to see if I genuinely had the power to do this? I would like to see that when anyone starts a petition and it meets all the criteria, that person gets to get invited to the House of Commons to debate the MPs themselves, to ask those questions, and it should be televised.
I agree.
So they can sit there in front of MPs and say, right, my question is, I think that you ought to be subject to criminal prosecution if you mislead the public. And I want to know what we can put in place.
And then you would list off every occasion when they've ever done that.
Well,
so, for example, those weapons of mass destruction will be making one heck of an appearance.
I was going to say, wouldn't it be quicker to just list off the times when they told the truth? I mean, they've been lying to the public for the last year.
All 3 times.
Well, when they said good morning at 6 o'clock, they was probably telling the right time.
Was it a good morning, though? That's the real question.
Well, that's true. Was it morning? Maybe it was 6 p.m, not a.m. But yeah, they lie and they cheat and they connive and they're there to protect each other. And these petitions show you that. You've just got to go through a few of them to see that the gatekeepers will not let anything through that's remotely critical of the government itself. And anything they don't want to talk about, they'll come up with those stock excuses, as Jordan said. There's either an existing petition and you have to go and hunt for it. You don't make it clear what you're asking the government to do. What was the third one?
The third one is there is already one that is similar to this.
No, I've already mentioned that.
Did you?
Yes.
You sure?
Yes.
Chat, tell me if she's lying.
There's a similar petition. It's not clear enough. This is what I said. There's a similar petition, or it's not clear enough what you're asking them to do. Or the third one was, we may debate this if we wish to. Oh no, there was a fourth one. When it comes to the honours or hiring or firing, it's nothing to do with government.
I must admit, I thought you listed that one first, but fair enough. I'm obviously in my own world.
Yeah, you weren't listening to me at all. So it's just another reminder that while we're manipulated constantly by government and our media, it's rather naive to think that these protests, any form of protest, even up to and including petitions, are going to make any difference. The debate is held between the people you're criticising. It's held at their whim. So there's nothing you can do to make sure that happens. There's no set criteria where you can say, great, so we've reached this stage, they now have to debate it. That's not even the case any longer. You don't get to control how it's debated or for how long, or if your original question is even a part of it. You don't get to see the results of the debate necessarily. And it can just essentially be rejected or ignored. These are your elected representatives at work.
So here's a question. What place do you think these petitions hold for us? Do you think there's any validity to them? Or do you think they are at least a decent rallying call to say that we're not happy with this one thing and then pull family members into signing it?
I think if there were a better system of collating petition signatories into one place to discuss the petition in question, that would be good to get people networking. Let's say if a petition is relating to, I don't know, not making masks mandatory for children, for instance. Anyone but a psychopath would agree with that. Wouldn't it be wonderful if when you sign a petition there's like a chat feature or something where all of the sane people who agree with that can actually come together and discuss it? I think that would have a purpose.
I agree.
But aside from that, it's just blowing smoke, isn't it? Because you sign it, you forget about it, it's gone, the government ignore it, and it's completely forgotten until I guess the next one comes along. Again, I don't want to put people off these petitions. I do still think it's good to show the government what we think of them. But I do think ultimately it's an exercise in futility. If you can't control the outcome of the petition, if you can't ensure that it goes to a certain stage by meeting certain criteria, they can just write it off, ignore it, file it away, or give you one of their stock excuses for not taking it any further. But that might be an idea. For the future, actually, this is something we can do. If you're going to start a petition, you, Joe, Jane, Rob, whatever your name is, set up a chat room on a platform and put it on your petition thing that you send around and tell people to join the chat. I don't know whether it would work, but surely it's got to be worth a try. But aside from that, I just because again, we're not acting as communities, are we? We're just a bunch of strangers online. We need to get past this idea that we are separate from one another. The things that we do, the things that we are, they matter to all of us. One of us represents all of us. The harm we do affects all of us. The good we do affects all of us. And the people that benefit from it are not us. Because we still don't come together. I would say, though, I would rather people keep creating these petitions than go out protesting. After the last stream, I've been really thinking about the value of protests. And I just think that the potential risk is not worth the possible results. So maybe petitions are the last line of peaceful protest. Maybe that's the last line of defence for us when it comes to voicing an opinion.
I think petitions have a useful place because they enable us to talk to friends and family about things and then put this in front of their face and basically say, sign this. Or at the very least have a conversation about this, whatever this is.
In that respect, yes. And you can say, look, like 100,000 people have signed this. It's always very frustrating to think how many people there are in this tiny little country, packed in as sardines as we are. When you see petitions that are so supremely important, just getting like 100,000 signatures. Is it back to apathy? Is it just too much effort for people? Maybe they think that there's no point.
I would say I don't think they're well advertised at all.
Maybe that's the problem then, that we're not...
I think that is a major part of the problem, because I would never have come across this, nor any of the others we've ever spoken about, if it weren't for people such as Andrew putting this on Discord. I think he's given us our last 3 so far, hasn't he?
So maybe it would do us all good then to start paying a bit more attention to what our governments are up to. And knowledge being
We're
power.
kind of we're in an odd place, because we all acknowledge that you can't actually influence government in any way, shape or form. There is no real political solution in the traditional form of it. We're not just going to be able to vote our way out of this problem. But we still have to pay attention to what they're doing.
Yes, we still need to know what they're up to. We still would need to know what they've got planned for us. Sorry. Yes, it is frustrating. Maybe the way to look at petitions is it's one of our tools in our arsenal, right? It's just one. Mm-hmm. It's not the only one. Maybe it's a more important one than we give it credit for. And as you say, maybe the biggest problem we've got is that we need to have more people, maybe more people with platforms, to share them about. And maybe that's something that we should all take on as a duty, and start helping them to gain momentum.
I think it is. Because you're right about the numbers. The numbers of these things are always very, very, very low. They're always around about 120,000. Some that get through, they take 6 months to get. Like 102,000, I think, was one that I saw. It's very, very, very low numbers. The largest position we've ever had in this country was the one that was headed up by the footballer.
I know.
Sterling.
Yes.
A couple of weeks ago, or a little bit more than a couple of months ago at this stage. And that only got 1.2 million. When you think about the amount of coverage that got,
yes,
that's kind of insane, really.
Well, that's because someone with a large platform was able to promote it. So yes, I do think we have a duty to do this when it's truly important, especially when we're talking about things like loss of freedoms. I mean, this is not something we can just set to one side and revisit. Once these things are gone, they'll never return. Never. One-time only deal for your freedoms, I'm afraid. But yeah, we definitely need to promote these more. We need to send things like these petitions to all of the content creators that we watch and follow, and just ask them, would they give it a shout out on the stream or at the end of a video or something, I think we have a duty to do this because as a tool for sending a message, the government is not going to care about 100,000 people thinking that they're rubbish or naff or they need to go. But what if a few million were signing these petitions? And then a few more, and then a few more.
It adds up.
They don't fear our opinion and they don't care about our opinion because ultimately they're not worried about us at all. They know that we're too scattered to make a real difference. But if we could come together in our millions under the guise of a single petition, what else could we come together in? We need to make them fear our rejection. And they just don't. And that's why they don't care about being held accountable, because they think that we're powerless. And we've never been powerless. We just behave like we are. That has to end.
That to me is the most frustrating thing of all. The fact that we are the ones that actually hold the power, but because we hold the power in a different sort of way, we hold it in numbers, whereas they hold it in just brute force. We act as if we have none at all. Like I've said many times before, if we were to stop engaging with the system, they wouldn't be able to do anything. You can see this play out in large international politics, in geopolitics. You can see this play out. Up until when was it? The early 70s, I think it was. The Taiwan was still recognized as the actual government of China. And then overnight, one by one, they started to say, yeah, wait a minute, we're not dealing with you, we can deal with the communists instead. According to the Taiwanese, they still have the actual claim as being the rightful government of China. But nobody in their right mind would ever go to Taiwan and say, hey, we want to trade with you, as opposed to going along to their neighbours next door.
Well, another good example is Brexit. If you want to see the power we have when we come together. 17.4 million. Not even everyone voted. But we moved mountains when we worked together.
No, we ruined their plan.
We could do it again and again and again. If we want to. If we can be bothered. And I think we can. It's just finding that venue, that way for us to all meet in the middle. Because you've still got this divide of people who get the news from alternative media or mainstream media. Some people are online, some people are offline. There's got to be a way for us to come together. Maybe these petitions could be the start of it. Maybe they would be a useful tool. Yeah, I agree. So there you go, get your thinking caps on, everyone. If you have any ideas about this, we're back tomorrow night for a live stream. It's a Saturday show. We'll probably talk about this a little bit more. So if you have any ideas, please share them. We'd love to hear what you think. And as you know,
you can also leave comments down below.
Yes. Yeah, there's always room for comments. I think if we put our heads together, we can come up with a solution for this. A way to make this work for us. And I think it's about time someone did.
Agreed.
Well, the solution is us. We know it is. We just got to find the right way to make it work for us. To make us work for us. So yeah. Yes, we will carry on this conversation on the live stream. We'll be looking for your comments. So let's hope there's some really good ones there. And yes, hope it's given you something to think about. No taxation without representation, right? It's my favourite phrase. These people do not represent us, only themselves. They only look after their own interests. It's time that we started looking after ours. But only we can make that happen. So let's start right now. Start thinking about this. Get this building, get some momentum behind this and make something happen. What a fantastic end to this lockdown nonsense, if we can actually do something practical, achievable, that's going to have a massive effect on a lot of people, that would be wonderful. So yes, we'll see what happens.
Indeed we will.
So I think that's it for tonight. Thank you so much for everyone who joined us. And we will be reading your comments, rest assured. And we'll see you tomorrow at 7:30 as usual. And take care for now.
Indeed. See you then.
Bye.